Hi long range hunting, welcome back. Today we're going to be covering the difference between bows and firearms for hunting. Now welcome back everybody. This is a topic that I see a lot of discussion on, and there's a ton of misinformation out there. People with uneducated opinions spouting off as fact, people's lack of knowledge, there's confusion, not understanding how these kill. And so that's what we're going to dive into, is showing the difference between them, and both in just practical sense of shooting, distance, etc., but also the lethality and how they kill of both arrows, either from long bows, compound bows, or crossbows, and then going into firearms and covering what a bullet does to kill and the comparisons between. All right, let's talk about bows first. Now, this is the oldest out of them. You have four types. You have your long bow, you have your recurve bow, your compound bow, and your crossbow. Now, with the first three, you have the compound, the recurve, and the long bow. You shoot what's called arrows. Now, these used to be sticks. Now they're either metal or carbon fiber, and they have a nice, nasty tip on it for killing. With a crossbow, however, it's called a bolt. Never understood that, but it is, but we'll cover that in a second. So you have those different types of bows. They're all launching a projectile. It's same basic function. And this, just like with a gun, the bullet is what dictates performance. The bullet in the case. The case gives you the velocity, the bullet gives you the performance. And so you have some that are good, some that are bad. Same with arrows and broadheads. Now let's cover real quick before we get into this. How do bows kill? How does that arrow kill? Well, plain simply, it's cutting and causing massive blood loss. So let's say you shoot a deer in the heart. What's happening is that arrow is going through. Now, depending on if you're running a 2-blade or a 3-blade, is going to dictate how that pattern is. I'm a 3-blade guy myself, but you put it through there and you're going to see 3 directions or just one direction as far as that wide cut. And it's going to slice open that heart. It's going to be pumping blood, and it's going to have massive blood loss. Now that deer is going to generally run off. It's going to go a little ways, and then it's going to end up falling, going down, or it can sometimes lay down, and it's going to sit there until it goes into shock and bleeds out from exsanguination. Now that's how they all do it. It doesn't matter whether it's a longbow or a crossbow. It does the exact same thing. It kills the same, it's that same blood loss. So how effective these are is directly dependent upon what you're using for a broadhead. Now we have several different categories. You have your practice tip here, which you don't use for hunting. I have seen people do it before, just being jackasses, and unfortunately stuff like this happens, but there's always going to be those idiots out there. And so this is for practice. You have your fixed blades, which is the blades are in a fixed position. This has 3. You also have ones that have 2 blades just going out. And then you have your mechanicals. These kind of have a love-hate relationship with a lot of people. Some people love them, some people don't. I've used several different ones, and this is the only one I've actually been really happy. In fact, it's the best performance I've ever seen. But what happens with these is it hits, and these blades are forced back. They open up extremely wide, wider than a fixed blade can, so you're getting way more cutting surface. Now, what's the benefit of this versus the fixed blade? Well, you have aerodynamics of flight, and so this is much more aerodynamic than the equivalent fixed blade. So It helps with your aerodynamics, so you're not getting as much drop or any issues with that. And so that's going to fly much better and give you a wider cutting. Certain ones are known for failures, though, of failing to open up. And so you kind of got to be really careful with the mechanicals. Some are really good, some aren't. Now, I've done a couple comparisons as far as firearms and these, but they are very, very different. And something that confuses people is about energy. Now, you'll see on these, okay, well, this, poundage, you're going to get this much energy potential. Well, guess what? It has nothing to do with what a gun does. That energy with a gun is hydraulic and hydrostatic shock. It's a mass displacement that causes tissue damage. These only cut. So there is no displacement with these. What you're getting with that energy is the amount of energy going into it and allows you for penetration. Now, penetration is going to depend on several other factors, though. One, you have your velocity, your amount of energy, but the other thing has to do with design. Now, this is one from Carbon Express. I hunted with these and didn't really like them. I still have a few, though, but this is designed more for flight than it is for penetration. It's much wider and it's not as heavy. And so you're looking for higher velocities. You're looking for just flight, basically. If you want a target shoot or whatever, you can use them for hunting, but I don't find they work as well. And then there's ones that are designed specifically for penetration. This is thinner and it's much heavier, and so you're getting more energy as far as penetrating with this. And it's just like with a bullet, the smaller the diameter, the more penetration you can achieve. Now, this is an Easton full metal jacket 5mm arrow. These are my bread and butter. I love these things. Absolutely. This combination right here is just mean. This is the Mega Meat from G5. Now, I use the T3, which was the previous version of this. This is their new improved version. And I've never shot anything that hasn't gone down within 15 yards. I mean, it is destructive. When those things open up, it slices. It's got this bone-crushing tip right here. And it'll blow through anything. I've blown through leg bones, everything. It is just nasty, nasty. And so there's advantages and disadvantages. Now, I use the G5 Striker when I'm in states like Idaho where they don't allow mechanicals, or in cases where, I'm hunting out of a ground blind and it's really close. I've had, the last deer I shot with these was in a place where I had from 40 yards clear down to they were 5 yards from me. And so I had to have that screen up, and mechanicals and screens don't work very well together. This is what you're talking about when you're looking at a two-blade. Now, these I've never tried. I can't speak for how they perform. A buddy of mine, Jared, sent them to me. Thanks, bud. I'll try them out and see how they work. And so that's another option as far as you can get two blades. I generally like the three blades. I find you get more cutting surface, and it not being flat, it prevents it from closing up. It's like if you just slice it like this, it can close up. Whereas if you do the three directional, it's much harder for that to close. And, it just causes more blood loss. But I appreciate that, Jared. I'll end up testing those out and let you know how they work, maybe on some hogs or something. Now let's take a look at these two as far as penetration goes. Now, I'm using the 5mm Easton full metal jackets, and I'm using this Carbon Express Blue Streak. Now, let's take a look at this real quick, and then we'll break it down. This is the difference between two arrows. This one didn't even penetrate this block. Only went in about, I don't know, that far. This one, you're gonna have a little more trouble with. Went all the way through and through metal. Now what you saw is a big difference in penetration. The Carbon Express arrow that's not designed for penetration stopped inside without exiting the other side of that block, Whereas the Easton actually not only went through clear up to the fletchings, it went into a metal barn, or it went into a metal shed. Barn for some reason, I can't talk. But it went into that shed. So it penetrated through the entire deer and metal. And that's the difference. You can really tell a difference in that penetration. And so, you know, if you're talking about an elk or a deer, you want 2 holes with archery. Guns, it's a whole nother story. But with archery, 2 holes are always best. But either way, you want that trauma. You want it to go in there and handle business. And picking the right arrow is vital to getting that performance. But I mean, it hit like a tank. It went through, and you're going to have no problems with that. And again, that's with a practice tip. That's not even covering, you know, what you can do with something like this. Now, this is my personal bow that you guys saw me shooting there. It's a Hoyt Carbon Spider 30. Very, very nice bow, 70-pound draw, and I've stacked a lot of animals with this. So very nice, very light bow, and gets the job done. Now, let's look at crossbows. Now, I want to do a section specifically on this for important reason, and that is there's a lot of misunderstandings. There was a couple years back, I got into it with some guys from Bow Hunters Association up in Montana who are trying to get crossbows made illegal. And their basis was that crossbows are rifles. And they are modeled after rifles. They have a stock like a rifle, and you can shoot, you know, 100 yards with it. And so it's unethical, and it gives you a huge advantage over regular archery, and people are just out there shooting crazy stuff. They tried one argument saying that Wyoming, who has had crossbows legal, saw like a 200% increase or some ridiculous number, saying that, you know, since crossbows have come up, they're just, you know, decimating. Everybody's using them and killing everything in sight because they're just like a rifle. They kill like a rifle. And it's utter bullshit. That group of hunters doesn't like them and were flat out lying. Now, I got banned from them for pointing that out because that harvest report is public information. It's available on Fish and Game's website. And so I confronted them with that, and they decided to block me and removed everything that I posted showing that they were lying about that. Crossbow doesn't have rifle in it. And in fact, if they actually knew what they were talking about, would understand that a crossbow and rifle, yes, there is some similarities there, but it's actually the reverse. Crossbows have been around for around 2,700 years. Now, that depends on what source. You know, it's from the 7th century and, you know, even older, that they say, you know, most people say between 4 and 7, some say the 1st. And so crossbows have been around for a lot longer than firearms. Firearms, the oldest one out there, is 658 years old. And so it's not that the crossbow has a stock like a rifle. The rifle was designed around a crossbow and utilized that stock. So it's actually the reverse of that. But a crossbow is still a bow. It doesn't matter if you're holding it vertical or you have those limbs and that string horizontal. It's irrelevant. It's not firing a bullet. It's shooting what's called a bolt, which is basically a short arrow, but it's utilizing the exact same type of killing tips. It's blood loss. They're trying to make it out that they're so effective, and that's why they want them banned. And, you know, they're saying guys are out there taking 100-yard shots because it can shoot that far. And that's bullshit. Plain and simple. Just because you can shoot so far with something doesn't mean they are. In fact, generally, they're using them at the same distance as what everybody else is using their bows at. The only difference is how they hold it. They maybe prefer that model. You know, not everybody prefers a longbow. Lots prefer compound bows. Does that make that a compound bow should be made illegal? No, it's just another method. I've never understood people's want to try to force their opinions on others and try to get stuff banned in order to appease them, like the whole world revolves around them. But crossbows are ancient. They've been used for a long time, and there are actually drawbacks. Now, can you put an optic on it? Sure. Can you shoot 100 yards with it? Sure. Is that standard? No. Take my compound bow. My brother's got a Hoyt also. We shoot out to 120 yards just for fun, and we're good. If you look at Cameron Haynes, he shoots his compound Hoyt out to 160 yards. Now, does that mean that we're taking shots on animals at that distance? No. It's just like shooting with a gun. You shoot at a further distance. If you're hunting 500, shoot 1,000. That makes that 500-yard shot that much easier. If you're with a bow, if you're planning on shooting 40 yards, go to 80 yards. And then that 40-yard shot is easy. It's about honing your skills. And so just because you can do it or people practice doesn't mean they're doing that on game. One of the most major drawbacks of them, though, is reloading. And that's something people don't understand. And they think, oh, because you can fire it like this, it's like a gun. And, you can just blast away. Well, you can't. It's actually really difficult. I don't have a crossbow to show, but when you go to reload a crossbow, there's a lot of movement. What attracts animals? Movement. You want to minimize that movement. And so, if you're holding your bow here and you go, just grab a new arrow, knock it, get on target, draw it back and fire, that's it. And you can continue to do that. With a crossbow, however, you're actually having to take that crossbow, put it down, set your foot in it, then you're having to bend down, pull it up, lock it in place, get that crossbow up, then place your arrow, and then get ready for the shot. That's a lot of movement. Back strain, it can be really awkward, especially in a tree. So it is not a quick or fast way to do it. In fact, to do a nice comparison of this, bringing guns into it, if you take a crossbow, it's like reloading an old muzzle loader. And I'm not talking about the new ones, I'm talking about the old ones where you had to pour the powder and everything versus a bolt action. A compound bow will compare to the bolt action. With a bolt action, I fire, I run the bolt, and then I fire again. There's a quick and simple movement to get another projectile in there. Now, if you take a muzzle loader, however, you're going to have to take that gun, you're going to have to pour the right amount of powder, and you're not doing it from the shoulder. You can't stay on there and do it. You've got to remove it, set it on the ground, pour the powder, put your patch, get your ball, get the rod out, pound it down, put your rod back in, then you've got to prime it, then you can cock it back, and then you can fire it. And so there's a lot more steps. And so a bolt action is going to be much easier to operate, especially as far as speed, than a muzzle loader. Same thing with a crossbow. I mean, it's just not fast. So, if you miss, or if you can shoot multiples, or, you hit it and it's standing there and you want to hit it again, it's really difficult to do and takes a lot of movement and can get you busted. So, there are a lot of disadvantages to it. I mean, a good bow hunter, especially, somebody who does a lot, can shoot 3-4 times in the time it takes to reload that crossbow, even with somebody that's skilled in doing it. So there's really not all these advantages that people think. That extra velocity does not really help in killing, to be honest, because you're not dealing like with bullets where you got more velocity, it's going to open up more. All you're doing is aiding in that penetration and a flatter trajectory. But for some people, it's more comfortable and more what they're used to as far as ergonomics or shooting a gun. So it's easier for them to pick up. Now let's dive into guns. I've talked a little bit about it, but bullets are a whole different animal. And it really doesn't matter what style it is, what gun it's fired out of. All that matters is velocity, and that's achieved by the case and the powder. And the rest is that bullet. Now, with bullets, it kills completely different. Now, you do kill through blood loss also. You can hit an animal, it causes massive blood loss, and it ends up going unconscious and, bleeding out. But how it kills is displacement of tissue. And so that projectile, by design, whichever design it is going to either open up a lot or a little or not at all. But that displacement, that hydrostatic shock, if you're under 2,200 feet per second, you're getting hydrostatic shock. If you're over 2,200 feet per second with proper bullet performance, you're going to get hydraulic shock. Now what that is it's displacement. Think about a rock in a pool. If you take a big rock up and you drop it into that pool, there's going to be a displacement of water, and then it's going to collapse back and that rock's going in. Now that's basically what you're doing. It's that impact, and it's causing the displacement because we're dealing with water-based mammals. Whether it's a human being, a deer, an elk, with water-based mammals, you have elasticity. And so what's happening is it's using that elasticity and stretching out. Now the organs like the heart, lungs, etc. are non-elastic. And so what happens is that's how they tear. If you're in either over 2,200 feet per second without good performance or under 2,200 feet per second with hydrostatic shock, what's going to happen is your permanent wound cavity, that crushing path from the bullet, that's what's going to be left. Now you're going to get a cavity that's going to open up and it's going to stretch. It's going to cause stuff to rupture, blood vessels, etc. And it's going to cause a lot of damage, again, bleeding, and then it's going to collapse back, and what's left is that hole. Now, over 2,200 feet per second with proper performance, you're getting into hydraulic shock, which is where that temporary wound cavity, that displacement is stretching beyond the elasticity point of that media or that animal. And so what's going to happen is it's just going to tear. It's basically you're taking the chest cavity and you can vaporize it. You can completely blow up the lungs. The heart will be completely destroyed. You can cause massive, massive trauma. And depending on how much you actually get, how much potential energy is going to dictate how effective that is. And so you're going to be looking at a chest cavity full of soup or puree basically, and you're just scooping it out versus taking out whole organs. With archery, you're taking out whole organs with a hole in it. If you're shooting under 2,200 feet per second or over, and you don't get that performance, you're coming out with a hole in that. Now, you can actually do shots with a rifle that you can't with a bow, like high shoulder, where you can actually shut down the CNS. You can do headshots, you can do neck shots, and just put enough displacement and damage there to lights out, cut all signals to the brain. And so you have a major advantage when it comes to bullets over arrows. Not only the distance that you can shoot, but the lethality. If anybody tries to tell you that an arrow is more effective than a bullet, they're feeding you a line of bull. Bullets' energy is about pure carnage. This, a bow, you're looking at energy as far as penetration. A bullet doesn't need to exit to get good performance. With a bow, you want, because you're going to have a track job. Unless you get extremely lucky, you're having a track job. And so you want 2 holes, more blood. With a bullet, you don't have to have that. It can stop and dump all potential energy into that target and just cause massive trauma, and it's not going anywhere. So that's all based on design. Firearms are way, way different than bows. Again, the bullet is going to dictate what kind of performance you get and how fast that animal goes down. So that's something you really have to understand and apply, both the study of bullet construction and terminal ballistics. And it's come a long way. I mean, guns have been around for 658 years. So there's been a lot of advancements, especially lately, our knowledge of ballistics, studying it, etc. And so today's bullets can do amazing, amazing things. And so you can get that trauma and that just massive, even without a CNS shot. My son, his first doe at 6 years old, he shot dead center in the heart with a 308 with a 168 grain ELD match at 60 yards, center punched the heart, and the energy transfer was enough that it actually dropped dead on the spot. It basically put it into a coma until it bled out. Whereas I did the same shot on a deer later that year with a bow, and it went 15 yards. Both, had the same shot placement, but one is way more effective than the other. In conclusion, don't listen to the nonsense that, like bows and guns are the same, or bows are more lethal than, a bullet and a firearm. It's just not true. Crossbows are not rifles. It literally says crossbow. It does not say cross rifle. And, crossbows were not designed after a rifle or a rifle stock. It's completely the opposite way. So just remember, there are people that just don't like them because they got their head up their ass. And so they'll spread all kinds of bad information, but just look at it with some basic common sense. A great way to think about this as far as, yeah, does it have a stock? Sure. But that doesn't change anything. If you take something like this and like this, guess what? They're the exact same thing. Do they have different accessories? Yes, but they fire the exact same cartridge and the exact same bullet. And so they will get identical terminal performance and killing. So the difference is just how they're built as far as changing the accessories. Still a 22 caliber bullet coming out of there, still going to do the exact same thing with the exact same bullet. So there's no real change. You know, crossbows, compound bows, recurves, and long bows, they're all the same. They're bows. It doesn't matter what change has been there. The thing that hasn't changed is what they fire. It's still an arrow. It's still a broadhead. Now, have there been advancements in these to make them more efficient? Yes. But as far as a crossbow and, you know, a rifle, not remotely the same. Just, you know, put that out of your head because it's ridiculous. Bows are great. I'm an avid archery hunter, love hunting bows, especially elk during rut. That's one of my favorite things to do. But I'll be the first one to admit it does not compare to a bullet in an animal. So I hope this has helped everybody. I hope it's helped with a little education and kind of debunk some of the ridiculous stuff about these. If you have questions, whether about bullets, terminal ballistics, guns, etc., or even archery, you know, hit me up in the comments and, you know, we'll talk about it. I love archery hunting too. Most long-range shooters do. That's another misconception. Most of us archery hunt. We love doing it. So look forward to talking to you guys in the comments, and everybody be safe out there. Happy hunting.
Hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video, and happy hunting.